Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams. You know I'm the CEO of Sound Financial Group, and you also know Corey. He is the president of Sound Financial Group, and we are here today to bring you guys some amazingly, some informative, and some fairly misleading content from the media as we have enjoyed doing for the last several months. And we're getting feedback from all of you that it's kind of interesting to you too, to start seeing through some of the malaise that gets shot at us out of these informational cannons that the financial institutions just feed this information into. And then you have largely, I think, journalists who went for liberal arts degrees, not that there's anything wrong with liberal arts degrees, but are not as grounded in economics as they write these articles, and most appropriately, the headlines that come out with these articles. So,
and, I did graduate with a liberal arts degree. So, for all the paparazzi that are researching us and gonna, gotcha later, like that is true. But we studied a lot of other things since. Yeah, I'm excited for the articles that we've got today, and some of them are actually really, really good research and substantiation of some important topics too. So what's the one you want to hit first, Paul?
Why don't we hit first? This new report finds almost 80% of active fund managers are falling behind their major indexes. So if you're new to our podcast, an active manager is somebody who attempts to time the market, meaning they move money in and out of the market in an attempt to beat their index, or they're picking stocks inside of a certain classification, say large cap growth, in an attempt to do better than the market is doing. But every bit of data we get our hands on shows us over and over and over again that they don't do such a good job of that.
And there's I had not actually heard of the Spiva Index before.
Oh, yeah.
So this is cool scorecard.
And you're right. This Spiva Index is not an index that's invested in, but rather an index of measurement for how these active managers do. And it is funny that 79% of fund managers underperformed the S&P 500, the S&P last year. And that's an 86% jump over the past 10 years. So not only
of who is underperformed, is that what that's saying?
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing that is a little bit less clear, we also have access to the white paper. If you guys want to click on the description, we've got a link to our webpage. We'll give you the ability to link out to these actual white papers we're going to refer to today that these articles are based on. We talk often that when you see something in the news and they're telling you something is a fact, but they link to the underlying data, it's always a good idea, if your opinion is going to matter for your future, to click on the underlying data and see what it says.
Yeah. But it is amazing how many times the underlying data is immediately contradicting the headline of an article. Like all you had to do was click for 3 minutes and look, and and they just put it there like it doesn't matter because most people don't look.
Well, and one thing that I think is a little tough in the way you read this is it says these funds underperform the S&P 500. Now, on its face, that might be inaccurate or an inappropriate measure, because there's a lot of funds out there that aren't investing like the Standard & Poor's 500, which is largely large cap growth stocks. So very, very large U.S. companies that are growth companies. And that wouldn't be a good comparison to, say, a value investing fund or a small cap investing fund.
Or anything with bonds in it.
Right.
Is not good. Right.
Right. Now, what is neat when you get deeper into the actual white paper that Spiva put out, you see that they are doing apples to apples comparisons. So they're only comparing, when they're comparing to the S&P 500, funds who are attempting to mimic the performance of the S&P 500 in terms of large cap growth stocks. So that is one thing to know. The article isn't as clear as it could be.
But they are doing a good apples to apples comparison when they say that. Yeah.
Yep. When they give you that 86%. So this is the thing we would hope people would take away from this article. We don't need to go super deep into it because otherwise it could be dangerous for those of you driving right now. If we went too deep into this article, you'd fade off, crash into a light pole. But what they're discussing is that one, active managers create more cost because of the turnover and how much stock trading they do in an attempt to outperform the market. They actually create more cost. So now they have to both do better than the S&P 500 by more than the cost that they created for themselves while trying to outdo the S&P 500. So for those of you that are our clients, that's why we use this passive structured investing approach where we own a super wide swath of the market, and with some tilts towards small cap value and profitability, we're working to put a little bit of extra return in the portfolio, but only because of the academic research on those three tilts towards small, toward value, and more profitable companies, as opposed to what many of these fund managers are doing in the active front, is trying to pick which stocks are going to do better and then have your funds invest in those stocks. And then when it doesn't work out, what you end up with most of the time is 86% of them underperforming what they would have anyway. So let's hit our next one, because the next one I think is one that's heavy on people's minds today. Real estate has been a big conversation for us as a country for the last couple of years, especially as people have felt locked down because of COVID and saying this house is too small, as I've been locked up in it and having to go into, day 400 and something of the 15 days to stop the spread. So we have this huge jump in people wanting to get into larger homes. And that's created a glut of buyers in the marketplace without the new accompanying inventory. Builders, because of COVID, were building slower and didn't have the ability to bring as much to market as people were demanding. Now, that along with our recent inflation concerns we have as a country, the Fed has also began raising interest rates. And the article title, kind of speak to what Corey said a minute ago about these titles not being very effective for what's in the content of the article, more awful news for home buyers. Mortgage rates just made the biggest jump this century. Now, I'll talk about the jump, Corey, and then I'll let you talk about the awful news part.
Okay.
So when they say it's the biggest jump in a century, what they're referring to is the percentage increase of a 30-year fixed loan from 2.65% on average across the country in January 2021 to 4.42 today. So they're looking at that jump not as a amount of percentage points, which would be like 1.77%, but how big of a jump is 1.77 on 2.65 as a percentage, which is 70-80% off the top of my head. That's what they're talking about as the jump. So it doesn't mean that mortgage rates are the highest they've ever been. It just means it's the biggest jump over, I think they used a 12-week measurement, largest jump since 1994. So it's still
but just think about that. Like, you got to watch out for when the time scale that they're talking about seems relatively arbitrary compared to the topic as a whole. It's like, it's the biggest percentage jump over a 12-week running period since there's so many. It's like in a tennis match, like that's the first time that a left-handed player has ever served from the right side 3 times. And I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like, there's too many what ifs. This is kind of like that.
Especially saying this century. So we're going to go to our, I don't know her name. I saw this once on a YouTube short. I think it was originally out of TikTok. We're going to listen to her briefly because we haven't listened to her in a few weeks.
I love my country, but this is what's wrong with America. This is why I tell y'all all the time, think for yourself. Critical thinking. Don't believe everything the media tells you. If the media gives you information with the intent to produce an emotional response, something's not factual.
That's it. If the media shares with you something in an intent to get an emotional response, it doesn't mean everything is unfactual, but it does mean something is unfactual. And we certainly find that here.
Well, and I think it's all factual. It's just that they're creating their own measuring lens to be able to make it more sensational.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's just not. And Paul, can we switch to the second part? Is it bad news or not? Because the article
references this Fred chart.
It references this Fred chart, and it doesn't really know. They don't really know if it's good or bad. They're not really anything else to say whether this is really good or actually really bad. But here's just one thought about rising interest rates and why it could actually be good. Because if we go back to, let's go back to 2008 on this chart, where mortgage rates were 6.46 was the average.
Yep.
In October of 2008. So they're, roughly a little less than double what they were back in 2008. But I know houses that are way more than double the price that they were since 2008. So when you really think about how home prices have increased over the last decade, in part because of lower interest rates, helping it be cheaper for folks to get money into homes and get them financed, I think you're paying more real dollars for a house and a mortgage today at a lower rate than you were in 2008, 9, 10. So I don't think people are net really better off because of those rates. So raising rates, cooling off the home mortgage market, making it easier to buy a home, that actually could be a win for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And you think about, for fixed income investors, rising interest rates means retirees have a better chance for their fixed income or the bond side of their portfolio to give them additional cash flow. And if you are a saver, you having a more reasonable interest rate environment as opposed to these super low rates might be good. And here is the thing for consideration. For those of us who got our mortgages at these lower rates, one thing that the article points to that I think makes sense is something that people don't think about often that could cool the real estate market, is that now if you have a home mortgage where you got a 2.8% rate,
yeah.
Now, if mortgage rates later this year end up at 5% or more, then you might go, gosh, we do want that new home, but I really hate to give up this low mortgage rate we have. Yes, the higher payment will mean something. And the higher the debt service on these mortgages, the less it should cost for homes, because people are buying homes. Most people are buying homes based upon the cash flow they can afford on the mortgage payment. And as a result, even people that pay cash will get affected, because the cash payer, say who sells their house in the Bay Area of California and then moves to Wyoming, the person buying their home is buying, even though they're going to buy for cash in Wyoming, the person buying their home in California is going to be getting a mortgage. On average, over time, they will be mortgaged homes. So those increased mortgage rates will have a cooling effect on the housing market. What we don't know is, will that just mean there's a stagnation in home values because this increase in interest rates is offset by this 40-year high in inflation that's continuing to press upward on home values, but we have this slowing feature of the increased interest rates? Time yet will tell, but it does speak to that if you're out there, you're considering buying a home, you're considering buying a rental property, two things you should keep in mind. If it's your home, make sure that you're fitting that total debt service in less than 15% of your income. Going much higher than that puts you at high risk of crowding out the amount of money you need to set inside in investments so that you, in the future, can live independently. Second, if you're buying rental properties, always buy the rental properties based upon them cash flowing, not based upon your hope that they will increase in value. Right. Because something outside of our control, like an increase in interest rates, even though your mortgage is not increasing because those mortgages are fixed and guaranteed for 30 years, it does mean that people that might buy your home from you do have to qualify for those mortgages, and that could limit the appreciation of your home or even cause it to go down in value in the current interest rate environment, especially as rates increase.
Yeah. And this is why any article you see where the headline says, because this thing happened, this other thing is happening, just know that most of the time they don't actually know. Like, they don't really have any proof. They just saw a thing and another thing. I'll give you another example. We were talking about how supply chain issues could be a huge impact on this market. Like, inventory of homes for sale is the lowest that a lot of realtors have ever seen it. And so part of the problem is new homes might not be getting onto the market as fast because they can't get all the supplies they need to finish building the home. So that could be a thing that's a bigger impact than any of these interest rates that we're talking about.
Well,
so
and like during the COVID shutdown, they had months they couldn't work on the homes.
And we're probably still catching up from all of that, for sure.
Indeed. All right. Our final article today is one that is, I think, Fox Business in this case, and frankly, the Transamerica study, totally missed the mark. The headline, women are far less financially prepared for retirement than men. And then, they got to give themselves the waiver. So in the title is Transamerica study. Like, you don't want to be the, we didn't say it. We're just saying they said it. So it's, but as we get down here, it says men have about twice as much money saved for retirement than women do. Of concern, nearly a quarter, 24% of women have less than $100,000 saved for retirement compared with just 14% of men. Now, we're not going to go deep into the study today.
That's less than 10,000 saved for retirement.
10,000, sorry.
Which is even more. We'll come back to that. That's even more so.
Yeah, I think that one we'll deeper dive into because the actual study itself, I had it pulled up here, is, I don't know how many, 78 pages. So we'll pull some highlights out of that, I think, for a future episode. But here's the part that I thought was most telling. It says 79% of men are confident in their ability to fully retire with a comfortable lifestyle compared to just 64% of women. Now, here's the thing. If I was just out in the country with a bunch of 4x4 pickup trucks with people drinking beer.
Wait, aren't you right now, like, out in the country with a bunch of, like, isn't that?
Except I don't drink beer much anymore. I'm more of a Cabernet guy. But if you were just out there with an equal number of men and women all drinking beer at the time, and somebody said, who thinks you can jump that mud hole? More men are going to raise their hand, even in the same vehicles.
Right.
So,
well, because Paul, the second half of that sentence, both men and women think they'll need to have saved $500,000 in order to retire comfortably.
I don't want to hit that yet. Let's just sit on this confidence thing. Generally speaking, men are inappropriately confident about their decisions.
Right.
So when they're part of the study says, and what Fox Business is highlighting, is that 79% of men are confident in their ability compared to 64% of women, I would expect that generally in life. Mainly because I think women are often better at assessing their capabilities. And studies have pointed to that. It's not that men are more confident, like that's a good thing in my terms.
No,
men are crashing in the mud hole than women in my example. And then now to your point, Corey, hit that again.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. Like they have this rating of how confident they are, but they're both pointing at the same marker. And that marker is woefully low. Like, all men and women, all of society, most people think they need a lot less money to retire than they actually do, because they haven't done the calculation of how much they're actually spending and what what that cash flow is, or just the simple rule of thumb of 4% of whatever you saved is what's going to produce your income stream. So $20,000 a year on $500,000. Now, even if they're also thinking of Social Security, and that's another, let's call it 30. Well, so now they're living off of $50,000 a year, but that's still like half of the country or less is going to keep the same income if that's the number.
So if everybody in the study, like the title could have easily have been for this article, both men and women are woefully underprepared for retirement. They don't even know how much it will take. Transamerica study. They could have put that.
Women are more aware of what it's going to take. Yeah.
Yes. And because $500,000 is $20,000 a year of income in a dependable way for your lifetime. Like, even if, to Corey's point, even if you take the average household income in the country, you're not close to replacing that. So what we're seeing here is that when you read an article like this, number one is to notice how much of it is just a bunch of opinions of people. They sometimes talk about these financial polls and studies as if they were, say, a medical study of the amount of carbs people ate every day, and people had their meals shipped to them and did these blood tests and all that. Like, though, they're just asking people, do you expect to rely on Social Security in retirement? Now, 27% of women said they do, and 17% of men.
But we have no idea how fit those people in the study were to make that assessment in a grounded way in the first place.
Yeah, I have a pretty good idea. If they said 500,000 was enough to retire, I'm pretty sure they're unfit to answer this question too. And this is not a dig on the people that participate in the poll. What I mean this to be is a dig on all of us who create an interpretation of whether or not we're okay or not financially without A, maybe working with an advisor to see if our math made sense, and B, understanding the math ourselves well enough to be able to do it. Like, I think there should be like required things that you know before you participate in a 401k plan, like the 4% distribution rate. And the simple way to do that math on how much money it'll take to replace your income.
And here's why I feel like Transamerica may have also sponsored this article, because you get to how women can prepare better for retirement.
Oh, yes.
And it's, right. Maximize your retirement contributions, anticipate periods of reduced income, reach out to a financial advisor.
And allocate your investments.
And allocate your investments, right. Like, that's what anyone would need to do to get it, right? And so
if you could be a man or a woman or somewhere in between, and all three of those things are probably still a really good idea, especially if you think $500,000 is enough for you to be able to retire. Now,
and this is what I'm getting kind of fired up here, because there are, there's lots of the financial industry is doing the research on demographics, watching all the baby boomer men die and the women take over the assets, and they're saying, shoot, we've been talking to the husbands, not the wives, for 30 years. We got no relationship with them. We got to do something to change this. And now all of a sudden they're building these financial planning resources for women to come alongside and help, but they're not giving them anything actually useful for their, like, trying to understand where they're coming from. They're just slapping a different label on the same old box and calling it specialized planning.
Exactly right. And here's the thing I would love to just kind of say to our audience as we wrap today is, for all of you out there, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably getting better informed than the average person. We know from this study, the average person thinks it's $500,000 is what's going to take to be able to retire. Now, one thing you can do to help other people make better decisions, like this video, subscribe to the channel, make a comment below. All of those things, the more interactions you have with our content, the greater likelihood that somebody else is going to see this. Mm-hmm. You could hit that share button and you can text the episode to a friend of yours. You just copy the link to it on YouTube and send it to them and say, hey, I thought you might get a kick out of this. Because frankly, if this is how people are thinking on average, then odds are the people that you most care about, that you'd like to be able to retire with, everything else, they're not seeing this kind of stuff either. And this doesn't mean that they need to be a client of ours. We do this podcast because we know it makes a difference for our existing clients, and we know it can make a difference for people that we may never otherwise get a chance to meet. And we love your help in that mission to be part of this, like the financial education in practical matters around money, allowing people to actually live the rest of their lives independently, because I don't think I've ever told this story before, that a longtime friend of the family that I grew up around. I mean, I knew this man since I was like 4. And I was in the industry for like 7 years before he was kind of getting ready to retire, and he was just misinformed about money. And I said, yeah, I need to roll the money out of my retirement plans and get it invested. And Corey came to me and he said, yeah, I got $700,000 and just figure I'll take out $70,000 a year. And I said, why do you think it's 70%? He says, 10% rate of return. I take out 10% a year. Mm-hmm. And I had to break it to him. It's like, you can't take 70,000 out a year. You could take 35. And I had to break the bad news to him that his money was not going to last based upon what he had been thinking for the last 10 or 15 years as he confidently went along with his existing knowledge, because nobody had ever told him about the 4% rule. Mm-hmm. And so it's our hope, me and Corey, every week we do this, we're thinking of all of you and the difference it might make for you or make a difference for somebody you share our content with, so that hopefully those people can reach financial independence like we hope you're on the path of being able to do. That without some bit of knowledge or something disrupting some of this common sense narrative, which is common sense leads to common performance. And what we need to do, according to all the retirement data, is we need to perform well above average as households to be able to retire effectively, to be able to have financial independence, because the advice that's being given, the things that people access every day, things that aren't like this podcast, are leading people to different versions of financial failure. That didn't feel like I ended on a very high note, Corey. You want to send us out with something inspirational?
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter if you are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. You're hearing this now for the first time. You've now got an opportunity to do something with it. And movement with money is not a linear thing. Our brains think very much in a linear way, but improvements can compound rapidly. And there's all kinds of different strategy outside of just what did I put in my portfolio and what kind of rate of return that it got. So the good news is, even if you're not sure what to do with this information, if you feel like you might have missed something, it's like the old adage, like, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, 30 years ago. What's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. And so start planting that tree today. If you haven't planted it before, you can still start to make a difference.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap us up, Corey. Everybody out there, from all of us here at Sound Financial Group, and at Your Business, Your Wealth podcast, we hope that this has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life.